A billionaire CEO arrived at his ex-fiancée's wedding, linked arm in arm with a homeless woman, and stunned every single guest. What happened next blew everyone's minds and uncovered a truth no one saw coming. But before we jump into the story, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. James Whitmore was a man of power, wealth, and commands respect. He had built his empire from the ground up, never allowing anyone to stand in his way. His name was known across the city, spoken with admiration by some and resentment by others. But all the power, wealth, and prestige in the world meant nothing in that moment. Not when James Whitmore opened the envelope and saw her name, Emily Caldwell, the woman who once promised him forever and left without a second thought. His fingers tightened around the invitation. "You betrayed me, Emily," he muttered, his voice low and bitter. "She is marrying someone else now, and had the audacity to invite me?" James let out a cold, hollow laugh. "You want me to sit there and watch you say I do? Seriously?" He shook his head, a fire igniting in his eyes. "If she thought I would show up alone, like some heartbroken man begging for closure, she was dead wrong. If I was going to that wedding, it would be on my terms," he said to himself. And what he had in mind, no one, especially Emily, would see it coming. That evening, after a long day at work, James found himself walking through the city streets, lost in thought. As he passed a small restaurant, something caught his eye, a young woman sitting alone on the curb, wrapped in an old, oversized jacket. Her clothes were worn, her hair messy, but her posture was upright, her expression calm. It wasn't pity that made him stop, it was her eyes. Clear, sharp, not pleading, just unbothered. On impulse, he approached her. "You need money?" he asked, keeping his hands in his coat pockets. She looked up slowly, gave him a half smirk. "What is this? Some kind of experiment? You ask, I say yes, and then you either toss me a few coins or give yourself a pat on the back." James blinked. That wasn't the answer he expected. Most people either ignored him or tried too hard to impress. She was neither. Ignoring her tone, he said evenly, "Come with me to an event. I'll pay you. Enough to make a difference." She raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? Do you always pitch offers like that, or are you just having a dramatic day?" He didn't flinch. "You don't have to do anything. Just dress up, smile, and walk in with me." She tilted her head, amused. "So basically, you want arm candy." "Got it." James narrowed his eyes slightly. She was testing him. "If you're not interested, I'll ask someone else." She laughed, this time for real. "Yeah? Good luck with that." Not a lot of options hanging around the sidewalk. He stayed quiet, studying her. And then, without warning, she stood, brushed the dust off her clothes, and stepped in close. "All right," she said, her tone casual. "I'm in. But just so we're clear, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I'm bored, and you seem interesting." James watched her for a long second. Who was this woman? She had nothing, yet carried herself like she had nothing to prove. He didn't know her name or her story. But suddenly he wanted to. The luxury car rolled smoothly through the city streets, its leather interior pristine and untouched by the outside world. Sophie sat beside James, her gaze fixed on the passing buildings beyond the tinted window. She showed no signs of nervousness, no wide-eyed wonder at the opulence surrounding her. Instead, she simply observed, her expression unreadable. "You don't even want to know where we're going?" James finally asked, breaking the silence. She turned to him, a smirk playing on her lips. "Some place is expensive, I imagine." James raised an eyebrow. "And you're not curious?" Sophie tilted her head slightly. "You found me on the street and offered me money to be your date. That's already strange enough. I doubt you're planning to sell me into human trafficking or something." James let out a short laugh. Nothing that dramatic. Just a social event, a wedding. She studied him for a moment before replying. "Right. And you think going there with me will prove what exactly?" His jaw tightened. "You read people too easily." She shrugged. "Maybe some things need to be erased." James glanced at her again, feeling an odd mix of frustration and fascination. He had expected her to be grateful, eager to escape her circumstances. But instead, she remained composed, almost indifferent to the drastic shift in her surroundings. It was as if she had lived in this world before, as if she belonged somewhere far removed from the sidewalk where he had found her. Minutes later, the car stopped in front of an elegant building, an exclusive beauty salon known for catering to the city's elite. James stepped out first, adjusting his suit before offering a hand to Sophie. She accepted without hesitation, stepping onto the pavement with effortless grace. Inside, the scent of high-end perfumes and styling products filled the air. A team of stylists rushed forward upon their arrival. A complete transformation, James instructed. Hair, makeup, clothes, everything. The staff nodded, immediately guiding Sophie toward a styling chair. As they worked, James watched her carefully. She closed her eyes as a stylist began washing her hair, her expression serene. "I've been in this world before," she murmured, as if reading his thoughts. James frowned. Before he could ask anything, the stylist pulled him toward the waiting area. "Mr. Whitmore, would you allow us to work uninterrupted?" He hesitated, glancing back at Sophie one last time before stepping away. There was something about her, something that unsettled him, and he intended to find out exactly who she really was. Hours passed as the team of stylists worked meticulously on Sophie. James paced in the waiting area, growing impatient. He had expected this to take time, but the anticipation gnawed at him. Who was this woman who had agreed to accompany him so easily? What secrets lay beneath her calm exterior? Finally, the stylist called his name. James stood and walked back to the salon, his steps measured but his mind racing. When he saw Sophie, he stopped mid-stride. She was no longer the woman he had found on the sidewalk. Gone was the dirt-streaked face and matted hair. In its place was a vision of elegance. Her once tangled locks now cascaded in smooth, shiny waves down her back. Her face, previously marred by exhaustion, was now flawless, her features enhanced by subtle yet striking makeup. The deep red dress hugged her figure perfectly, accentuating every curve, and the matching heels gave her an air of confidence that bordered on regal. Yet what surprised him most was her expression. She wasn't shocked, nor did she seem impressed by the transformation. Instead, she simply gazed at herself in the mirror, as if recognizing a version of herself she had long forgotten. "What is it?" she asked, catching his curious stare. James cleared his throat, composing himself. "You don't look surprised." Sophie smiled, a mysterious glint in her eyes. "Because I'm not." He crossed his arms, watching her closely. "Then who are you?" She grabbed the purse the stylist handed her and walked toward him. "Someone who knows how to seize good opportunities when they come." James narrowed his eyes. He wanted answers, but he knew pushing her wouldn't get him anywhere. For now, he would play along. As they stepped into the waiting car, James couldn't help but glance at her again. She settled into the seat beside him, observing the city lights as they passed. "You're very quiet," he remarked. "I'm just enjoying the silence," she replied with a faint smile. Most people in her situation would be dazzled by the sudden shift in lifestyle, but Sophie remained composed. She was different, too different. And as the car glided toward the event, James realized he had invited more than just a companion for the night. He had brought someone into his world who might challenge everything he thought he knew. The car came to a smooth stop in front of the grand banquet hall, where hundreds of guests had already gathered outside. Couples stepped out of limousines and luxury cars, showing off their designer attire and sparkling jewelry. Photographers and journalists lined the entrance, capturing every detail for the society pages. James stepped out first, adjusting his suit with practiced ease. Then, he extended a hand to Sophie. She accepted it gracefully, stepping onto the red carpet as if she had done it countless times before. The immediate reaction was undeniable. All eyes turned to her. Women whispered among themselves, trying to decipher who this stunning woman accompanying James Whitmore was. Men watched her with open interest, captivated by her poise and presence. Yet, Sophie remained unfazed. She lifted her chin, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, as if she were already accustomed to being the center of attention. James guided her down the carpet toward the entrance, keeping a firm but respectful grip on her arm. "Follow my lead," he murmured under his breath. "Be polite, smile, and don't draw unnecessary attention." She raised an eyebrow. "Did you bring me here to make your ex jealous or to be invisible?" James pressed his lips together, refusing to take the bait. "Let's just say I want to make an impression." Sophie chuckled softly. "Then I suppose I should thank you for choosing me." They entered the grand hall, where crystal chandeliers sparkled under golden light. The room was filled with high society figures dressed in their finest, engaged in conversations about business, politics, and the latest scandals. It didn't take long for Emily and her fiancé to appear in James's line of sight. Emily looked radiant in an elegant white dress, her smile perfectly crafted to charm everyone. Beside her, Daniel Mercer, the man she had chosen over James, stood tall and composed, exactly the type her family would approve of. Emily's eyes met James's briefly, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it with a forced smile. Then, her gaze landed on Sophie and froze. With a calculated smile, James led Sophie directly toward them. "Emily," James greeted, his tone polite yet cold. Emily blinked a few times before forcing a smile. "James, what a surprise. I didn't expect you to come." He held her gaze for a moment before glancing at Daniel. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss the opportunity to celebrate the happy couple." His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it, one that didn't go unnoticed. Emily's eyes flickered with uncertainty before settling on Sophie. "And I assume this is—" Before James could respond, Sophie extended her hand naturally. "Sophie, a pleasure to meet you." Her voice was firm, elegant, and utterly composed. Emily hesitated for only a second before shaking her hand, though her grip was tighter than necessary. "Sophie, you look familiar." Sophie smiled, tilting her head slightly. "Do I?" James watched the exchange carefully. Emily was clearly unsettled, and Sophie was playing her part well. Daniel, sensing the tension, cleared his throat. "Shall we toast?" He raised a champagne glass, attempting to break the awkward atmosphere. James nodded, lifting his own glass, but before he could turn away, Sophie took another step forward. "I hope you'll be very happy," Sophie said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to mask the underlying challenge. "Marriage is a serious commitment. I was once engaged myself." James stiffened slightly. Emily and Daniel exchanged glances. "Oh," Emily said, trying to sound casual. "How did that work out for you?" Sophie took a slow sip of champagne before replying. "My fiancé decided I wasn't the right choice for his family." She smiled, but there was something pointed beneath it. Emily's eyes narrowed, her composure slipping just a little. "Well, that's an interesting coincidence," she said, her voice tight. Sophie smiled again, unbothered. "Isn't it?" An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. James could see it. Emily was rattled, even if she tried to hide it. Finally, Sophie lightly touched James's arm. "Would you like to dance?" He blinked, surprised. "Yes, or would you rather stay here and watch your ex-fiancée try to figure out where she knows me from?" James chuckled softly, liking the game Sophie was playing. "Let's dance." As they moved toward the dance floor, Emily's eyes followed them, her fingers tightening around her glass. The orchestra played a soft melody as James and Sophie glided across the polished floor, their movements synchronized in perfect rhythm. The ballroom was alive with laughter and conversation, but all James could focus on was the woman in his arms. "You did that on purpose," he murmured, leading her with precision. Sophie smiled, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Didn't I tell you I've been in this world before?" James studied her carefully. "You keep surprising me." She arched an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He let out a quiet chuckle. "I haven't decided yet." Sophie laughed softly, the sound sending an unexpected warmth through him. "I think you've already realized that I'm not exactly what I seem." "You know much more about this world than you should," he admitted. She tilted her head slightly. Let's just say I've been surrounded by people like this before. Before James could respond, a group of businessmen approached, glasses of champagne in hand. They were investors and magnates he knew well. Whitmore, one of them greeted, shaking James's hand. You finally decided to show up at a social event. James returned the handshake firmly. I thought it would be interesting to celebrate the couple. The businessman's attention quickly shifted to Sophie. And who is your lovely companion? Before James could respond, Sophie stepped forward, extending her hand with natural confidence.
Sophie.
A pleasure to meet you. Her response was so effortless, so poised, that none of the men questioned her presence. One of them repeated her name thoughtfully. Your face looks familiar. Sophie smiled, maintaining the mystery. Perhaps we've met at an event before. Another businessman joined the conversation. And what do you do, Sophie? She picked up a champagne flute from a passing waiter, swirling the liquid before answering. I enjoy observing the financial market. The rise in technology investments has been quite interesting lately, especially the new startups focused on artificial intelligence. There was a brief silence. None of them had expected such an articulate response. That's a rather specific topic, one of the men commented. Sophie smiled. I just follow trends. After all, everything comes down to who gets the inside information first, doesn't it? The men laughed, now more at ease. Sophie had captured their interest. James, however, felt a growing sense of frustration. Sophie wasn't just fitting in, she was taking over. Before he could intervene, a tall man with a distinguished appearance approached. Damien Hartwell, one of the country's most influential investors. Known for his sharp instincts and ability to size people up quickly, he studied Sophie with interest. Sophie, he said, nodding. You seem very comfortable here. She turned to him with a polite smile. Maybe because I am. Damien laughed. I like that. He looked at James. And what's your relationship with Whitmore? Sophie shot James a playful look before answering. Just an interesting partnership. James narrowed his eyes. Indeed. He took the glass from her hand and handed it to a waiter. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to steal my companion for a moment. He grabbed her wrist and led her to a more secluded area of the ballroom. What exactly are you doing? He asked through clenched teeth. Sophie smiled. Just having fun. You're standing out too much. Wasn't it the plan to make your ex-fiancée jealous? James narrowed his eyes. You play very well. Sophie tilted her head. And you don't like it when you can't control the game, do you? James let out a short laugh. You're not just a simple beggar. Sophie crossed her arms. Took you long enough to figure that out. He raised an eyebrow. Then who are you? She gave him a knowing smile. Someone who knows how to seize good opportunities when they come. Before he could respond, Emily appeared beside them. I hope you're enjoying the party, she said politely, though her eyes assessed Sophie cautiously. Very much, Sophie answered before James could speak. Emily forced a calculated smile. You know, Sophie, I feel like we've met before. Sophie smiled. Maybe. The high society world can be small after all. James noticed the way Emily pressed her lips together. And where do you know James from? Sophie's smile remained unchanged. I think it's more fun if that stays a mystery. Emily let out a soft laugh, though there was something sharp in her gaze. Of course. Mystery always adds an interesting touch to stories. She turned to James. Can we talk for a moment? James nodded, casting one last look at Sophie before stepping away. She simply smiled, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. James followed Emily to a private balcony, the night air crisp against his skin. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but the woman before him burned with something far fiercer. Who is she, James? Emily asked bluntly, crossing her arms over her immaculate dress. He kept his expression neutral. Sophie. My companion. Emily let out a dry laugh. Don't treat me like a fool. I know the kind of woman you bring to events like this, and she doesn't fit the mold. James felt a surge of irritation. What exactly do you want to know? Emily narrowed her eyes. Where did she come from? James didn't confirm it, but his silence spoke volumes. My God, she whispered, realization dawning on her. You found this woman on the street, didn't you? James didn't deny it, but his silence was enough. This is unbelievable, Emily said with a disbelieving laugh. You brought a beggar to provoke me? James countered firmly. I brought a confident, intelligent woman who fits in here perfectly. Emily's eyes darkened. Then explain why she knows too much for someone who is supposedly living on the street. James felt a chill run through him. Emily's words lingered. She knows too much. And she was right. Back inside, Sophie moved through the guests with effortless grace. It was inevitable that Emily would approach her again. You dance well, Emily remarked, appearing in front of her. Sophie smiled. Thank you. So do you. Emily tilted her head, studying her. And you speak well. You know how to carry yourself at an event like this. I appreciate the compliment. Emily's lips curved into a thin smile. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. Sophie remained composed. Then tell me, Emily, who do you think I am? Emily studied her for a long moment. That's what I'm still trying to figure out. She picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. But don't worry, Sophie, I always find out. She took a sip and disappeared into the crowd. Sophie stood still, taking a deep breath. Emily was starting to suspect something, and that was a problem. The drive back to the hotel was silent, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. Sophie watched them pass, her fingers tracing the rim of her wineglass absently. She could feel James's gaze on her, searching, calculating. You want to ask me something, she said without looking at him. I do, he admitted, his voice low. But I don't know if you'll answer. She didn't flinch. Depends on the question. James tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Who are you, Sophie? She didn't look surprised. The woman you chose to make an impression on your ex-fiancé. His jaw clenched. No. You know too much. You act like someone who has lived in this world before. She stayed quiet for a long moment. And what if I don't want to tell you? James let out a short laugh. Then maybe I'm not the right person for you. She opened the car door and stepped out without looking back. Then maybe I'm not. As the hotel door shut behind her, James sat still for a moment, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. She was hiding something, and he was going to find out. Sophie locked the hotel room door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The evening had gone better than she had expected. Emily was suspicious, and James was closing in. She had known this would happen eventually, but the speed at which the truth threatened to unravel startled her. She stepped away from the door and walked to the mirror, staring at her reflection. The luxurious dress, the flawless makeup, it was as if she had slipped back into a life she had once known. For a moment, she looked like someone else. Or perhaps, she was becoming who she had always been. Pulling out a disposable phone hidden in her bag, she typed a short message. He started investigating. Seconds later, a reply came. Then it's time for you to decide your next move. Sophie deleted the message and let out a quiet sigh. She knew she couldn't keep the secret for long. Soon, James would find out the truth. And when he did, everything would change. James sat motionless in his office the next morning, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the space. Outside, the city bustled with activity, but inside, his mind was consumed by a single thought, Sophie. She was a mystery, one that defied logic and challenged his understanding of control. He had spent years mastering every aspect of his life, ensuring that nothing happened without his knowledge or approval. Yet, Sophie had slipped into his world effortlessly, disrupting the order he had so carefully constructed. She knew things she shouldn't, acted like she belonged in places she had no record of ever being. It was as if she had erased her own history, leaving behind only fragments that hinted at a past she refused to share. James set his cup down and rubbed his temples. He needed answers. Reaching for his phone, he dialed a number he hadn't used in a while. The call connected after a few rings, and a familiar voice answered on the other end. It's been a while, Whitmore. Who's the target? James didn't hesitate. Sophie. No last name. Give me 48 hours. A chuckle came through the receiver. This makes things more interesting. James ended the call and leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the skyline. If Sophie was playing a game with him, then he would soon see her cards. Hours later, after leaving the office, James decided to find her. He had booked a suite for Sophie at a luxury hotel, and he was certain she was still staying there. When he arrived, he didn't bother knocking. He simply knocked loudly, determined to get answers. It took a few seconds, but Sophie finally opened the door. She wasn't dressed in the extravagant gown from the previous night, nor was she adorned in the flawless makeup that had drawn so many eyes. Instead, she wore a simple top and jeans, her hair slightly messy, her expression unreadable. "Were you expecting someone?" James asked, crossing his arms. She didn't seem surprised by his visit. "Not really. But you don't seem like the type who announces his arrival, do you?" He studied her for a moment before stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside, letting him in without protest. "I was just making tea. Care for some?" James ignored the offer, scanning the neatly arranged space. There was no sign of the woman who had once lived on the streets, no remnants of hardship, no clutter, no indication that she had ever struggled. "You've always been straightforward," he said, turning to face her. "So, why do you insist on using small talk?" She raised an eyebrow. "You don't like small talk, so why should I?" He crossed his arms. "Tell me the truth, Sophie." She raised an eyebrow. "The truth about what?" "About you." "Who are you really?" She walked over to the couch and sat down, folding her legs beneath her. "Why does that bother you so much?" His fists tightened. "Because you came out of nowhere, accepted my offer without hesitation, and act like you already belong in this world. But there are no records of you anywhere." Sophie was silent for a moment before sighing. "Fine, James. I'll tell you a little." He sat across from her, waiting. "I grew up in a world very similar to yours. Luxury, parties, powerful connections. But that world can be cruel, especially when you become an obstacle to the wrong people." James narrowed his eyes. "Obstacle? My family was influential. My father ran businesses that involved a lot of money. But one betrayal made everything fall apart overnight." James frowned. "Who betrayed you?" She looked away. "Someone I trusted." He sensed there was more to the story than she was revealing. "Why did you erase your life?" She gave a sad smile. "Because sometimes it's safer to disappear." The silence between them grew heavy. James knew she wasn't telling him everything, but this was the first piece of the puzzle. "And now," he asked, "what do you plan to do?" She met his gaze. "I'm still deciding." James stood up. "You can keep deceiving me, Sophie, but I will find out the truth." She watched him leave the room without saying another word. Later that day, James received a call from his investigator. The moment he heard the voice on the other end, he gripped the phone tightly. "I found something," the investigator said. "You were right. Sophie isn't who she pretends to be." James's pulse quickened. "Go on." "She's not just some woman who randomly accepted your offer. Her real name is Sophie Delaney, daughter of Richard Delaney." James's blood ran cold. He knew that name. Richard Delaney had been a powerful construction tycoon, a man whose influence had stretched across industries. But he had vanished from the public eye years ago. "There's more," the investigator continued. "Richard Delaney went bankrupt a few years ago after a scandal involving embezzlement." James swallowed hard. "And who was involved in that scandal?" A pause. Then the answer came, confirming what James had begun to suspect. Emily Caldwell. The pieces clicked into place. Sophie wasn't just some woman who had randomly accepted his offer. She had a direct connection to Emily, his ex-fiancée, the woman who had destroyed her family. James hung up the call and stared out the window of his office, his mind racing. Everything had changed. Sophie hadn't shown up in his life by chance. She had a reason for being there. And now, he needed to confront her. Later that evening, James found himself in his office, reviewing documents but unable to focus on a single word. Sophie's image kept flashing in his mind, the sparks of anger and vulnerability in her eyes, the way she never backed down. Before he realized it, he grabbed his car keys and drove to the hotel where she was staying. He needed to see her. He needed to hear the truth from her own mouth. The door opened after a few seconds, revealing Sophie with a tired expression. Her hair was slightly messy, and there was a faint shadow beneath her eyes. "James," she said, her voice carrying surprise. "We need to talk." She sighed and opened the door wider, letting him in. "I didn't know you made late-night visits," he said, stepping inside. "Neither did I," she replied, crossing her arms and staring at him. "Can you stop testing me for a minute and tell me the truth about why you accepted my proposal without hesitation?" James studied her for a moment before speaking. "Because Emily Caldwell destroyed my family." The words hit James like a punch to the gut. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through him. "She was responsible for my father's downfall, for the destruction of my life," Sophie continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "My father, Richard Delaney, owned one of the largest construction companies in the country. He was an honorable, respected man until he trusted the Caldwells. Emily came into the business as a strategic partner, someone he believed he could rely on." James listened intently, his stomach churning as she spoke. But in reality, she was manipulating him, creating fraudulent deals, embezzling money, putting his name on illegal transactions without his knowledge. When everything exploded, my father was accused of corruption. He lost everything, our home, our dignity. Her voice wavered, and for a moment, James saw the pain behind her composed exterior. He passed away before he could defend himself. James felt a pang in his chest as he absorbed her words. Sophie walked to the window, hugging herself as if trying to hold onto the fragments of her past. After that, everything fell apart. My mother got sick shortly afterward and couldn't hold on. I tried to fight, to prove his innocence, but Emily had already closed all the doors on me. In no time, I had nothing left. James stood and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You survived on the streets?" She nodded. "Yes. And that's how I learned never to trust anyone again." He reached out and lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You don't have to do this alone." She pulled her face away, her expression guarded. "I don't need a savior." "I know," he said, his voice softening. "But that doesn't mean you have to carry everything by yourself." Sophie let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You think you can protect me?" "I think I want to protect you," he replied, his gaze unwavering. She blinked, surprised by his sincerity. "And why is that?" He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to articulate the emotions stirring within him. "I don't know what I'm feeling anymore when I'm around you." There was a long silence as Sophie processed his words. Finally, she turned fully to face him. "Does that bother you a lot?" He shook his head. "Maybe it's best if we keep our distance." "I can't do that," he said firmly. She looked away, clearly disturbed by the direction of the conversation. "Then what about Emily? The mere mention of her name is enough to bring you back to reality." James hesitated. "If everything you said is true, I don't know who she really is." Sophie nodded slowly. "But I do, and I won't stop until I settle the score." James remained silent, knowing he wouldn't be able to convince her to back down. "Then I'll be by your side," he said finally. Sophie gave him a small, bittersweet smile. Even knowing this could end very badly, he took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Even then, late that night, James was awakened by the shrill ring of his phone. Groggily, he reached for it, flipping it open without checking the caller ID. "James," came the urgent voice of his investigator on the other end. "We have a problem." James sat upright, rubbing his eyes. "What is it?" Emily already knows Sophie is around, and she's not happy about it. His heart raced. "What is she going to do?" "We don't know yet," the investigator replied. "But someone is digging for information on Sophie." James clenched his jaw. "Keep me posted on any updates." He hung up and stared out the window of his office, a heavy weight settling on his chest. Emily wouldn't sit idle while Sophie threatened her carefully built empire. If she was gathering information, it meant she was preparing to strike. He needed to act before it was too late. The next morning, James found Sophie on the hotel balcony, seated on the ground with her arms wrapped around her knees. She was staring at the horizon, her expression distant. He approached quietly, crouching down beside her. "You know she's found out, right?" he said, breaking the silence. She blinked a few times, as if trying to hold back tears, but one slipped down the corner of her eye. "I know." James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's not going to stop. Neither will I." She looked at him, the weariness in her eyes giving way to determination. "Then we need to act before she does." Something inside him tightened as he watched her. The way her hair was slightly disheveled, the tiredness etched into her features, it reminded him that, despite her strength, she was human. Without thinking, James pulled her into an embrace, holding her close against his chest. "It's going to be okay," he murmured. She didn't resist. She simply closed her eyes and rested her face against him, finding solace in his presence. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. In that moment, they both understood. They were in this together, and Emily had no idea what was coming. Since his conversation with Sophie the previous night, James had been unable to find peace. Knowing that Emily was responsible for ruining Sophie's family changed everything. He had nearly married a woman capable of destroying lives without hesitation, and now she was targeting Sophie again. That morning, while reviewing reports in his office, James received another call from his investigator. "James, we have a problem," the investigator said without preamble. "Go on," James replied, already bracing himself. "Emily is up to something. My contacts say she's gathering information on Sophie. It looks like she's planning to expose something against her." James clenched his jaw. "What exactly did she find out?" "I don't know yet," the investigator admitted. "But I do know she's already reached out to lawyers and journalists. If she's going that far, it means she has something big." He threw his pen onto the desk and stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Find out what it is, before she makes a move." "I'm on it," the investigator assured him. "But I suggest you warn Sophie." James took a deep breath. "I'm on my way to see her now." When he arrived at the hotel where Sophie was staying, James knocked hard on the door. She opened it quickly, surprised to see him so tense. "What is it?" He walked in without waiting for an invitation and shut the door behind him. "Emily is making a move against you." She didn't seem surprised. "What exactly did she find out?" He hesitated. "She's gathering information. My investigator believes she might try to expose you publicly." Sophie didn't flinch. "I knew this would happen." He crossed his arms. "And you're this calm about it?" She let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "After everything I've been through, James, do you really think a scandal is going to scare me?" James felt a surge of admiration, mixed with concern. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "You're not a burden, James. You're the reason I'm fighting." He studied her for a moment, realizing that no matter how hard he tried to protect her, she would never back down. "Then I'll be by your side," he said firmly. She gave him a small, bittersweet smile. Even knowing this could end very badly, he took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Even then, that evening, Sophie received an unexpected invitation, an exclusive private dinner at the Caldwell Club, an elite establishment known for hosting only the most influential members of high society. The message was simple: your presence is requested. She held the invitation tightly, her fingers pressing into the thick paper. James, sitting on the couch in her room, read the note and scoffed. "This is obviously a trap." She raised an eyebrow. "I know, but I'm going anyway." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "You can't just walk into her trap." She stepped closer, her expression unwavering. "I'm not running." James let out a frustrated sigh. "Then let's make sure Emily is the only one who loses tonight." The night of the Caldwell Club dinner was tense from the moment Sophie stepped through the grand double doors. The mansion was bathed in soft lighting, its grand halls filled with select guests for the exclusive dinner. Sophie stepped into the venue, her navy blue dress exuding power and mystery. She moved like a woman who had nothing to lose, but everything to prove. Across the room, James stood near the bar, blending in with the crowd but keeping a watchful eye on every movement. He had ensured security was discreetly in place, ready to act if needed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and Sophie was ready to deliver it. Emily was waiting, perched near the fireplace like a queen guarding her throne. She smiled thinly when she saw Sophie approach. "Sophie," Emily said, a venomous smile curling on her lips as she sipped from her glass. "I didn't think you'd actually show. Then again, you never were good at resisting drama." Sophie's gaze was steady, unbothered. "And you never were good at hiding your desperation." A flicker of irritation crossed Emily's face before she masked it with a tight smirk. "Still the same smug little girl clinging to a dead man's legacy, I see." Emily leaned forward slightly, her voice low. "Careful, Sophie. I still know how to ruin people." Sophie tilted her head. "I'm counting on that. You see, tonight isn't about me. It's about everything you thought you buried." "And what do you mean by that?" Emily asked. "Let's enjoy tonight, Emily," Sophie said, smiling. A subtle nod from James was the only signal needed. Suddenly, the soft background music faded. A large screen lit up at the far end of the hall. Guests turned, confused, as Sophie stepped to the front. A voice came through the speakers, an old voice message. It was Emily's voice, unmistakable, cold, calculating. "Just forge the signature. Richard will never know. And once the deal closes, transfer the funds through the holding account. I'll handle the rest." The crowd began murmuring. Then came scanned documents, original contracts from the Delaney Corporation days, forged with Richard Delaney's signature. Anonymous testimonies from ex-employees. Hidden camera footage of Emily pressuring a junior staff member to destroy evidence. Sophie had collected it all. Emily's expression faltered for the first time. "You orchestrated it all," Sophie said calmly. "You framed an innocent man and ruined his family. My family." Emily shot up from her seat, her voice rising with panic. "This is a setup. It's fake. This is defamation." But two men in suits were already walking toward her, officers from the Financial Crimes Unit. One displayed a badge. The other held a warrant. "Emily Caldwell," one of them said clearly, "you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, corporate sabotage, and obstruction of justice." The room gasped. Emily stepped back, shaking her head in disbelief. "No, wait, you can't. This isn't real. I'm Emily Caldwell." But the cuffs clicked into place. Sophie exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. As Emily was escorted out, the guests who once smiled at her now avoided her eyes. Her kingdom was crumbling, and no one wanted to be caught in the rubble. James walked over slowly, his eyes never leaving Sophie. "You sure you're okay?" She gave a small nod. "It's over. She can't hurt anyone anymore." "But this changes everything," he said quietly. Sophie turned to him. "No. It reveals everything." The next day, Emily's arrest dominated the headlines. Her financial empire collapsed within hours as investors and allies abandoned her, fearing association with a convicted criminal. Later that evening, Sophie and James stood in his penthouse, looking out over the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She held a glass of wine in her hand but didn't drink, her thoughts drifting. "You did it," James said, breaking the silence. She turned to him, a small smile forming. "We did it." He returned her smile, stepping closer. "And now, Sophie, aside from revenge, would you start over?" She hesitated, considering the question. She had spent years fighting for justice, but now, with Emily gone, she had to decide what came next. James reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to her. "This is a proposal for a new business, a company in your name." Her eyes widened. "A business?" He nodded. "A partnership. You have talent, Sophie. You have vision. I want you to have something that belongs to you." She set her wine glass down and crossed her arms. "James, I don't need your charity." He chuckled, shaking his head. "This isn't charity. It's an investment in you." She looked at him for a long moment before sighing. All right, but on one condition. James raised an eyebrow. Which is? She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. I do this my way. He smiled. You always do. The air between them shifted, something warm and intense lingering there. Without thinking, James pulled her into a kiss. This time, there were no barriers, just the raw, undeniable connection between them. When they parted, Sophie met his gaze and whispered, "Good night, James." Then, she turned and walked away. James stood still, watching her leave, knowing she felt something too. Later that night, Sophia was in her office, lost in thought when James walked in. He looked at her with intensity, his heart pounding. "I love you," he said without hesitation. She blinked, caught off guard. "James!" He stepped forward, his voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I know it seems sudden, but I can't pretend anymore. I love you." She looked at him, her heart racing. "I know." He studied her carefully. "What do you mean?" She let out a soft laugh, tears threatening to spill. "You make me uneasy. I've never felt this way before." He reached out, gently cupping her face. "I want to protect you." She looked at him, something shifting in her gaze. "I don't need a savior." "I know," he murmured, "but that doesn't mean you have to carry everything by yourself." She searched his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." He smiled faintly. "Too late for that." She leaned into his touch, realizing she couldn't hide from her feelings any longer. "I love you too, James." His heart soared. "Then let's build a future together." She nodded, her heart full. Together. In that moment, they knew their love was stronger than anything that had come before. Months later, the big day finally arrived. Sophie had never imagined she would dream of a wedding, but there she was, standing at the edge of a beautiful garden by the sea, dressed in white, ready to say I do to the man who had changed her life. The ceremony was intimate yet breathtaking. White flowers decorated the altar, and elegant chairs were neatly arranged for the guests. The sound of the ocean in the background created a magical atmosphere. James stood at the altar in a sleek black suit when Sophie appeared at the aisle. His heart skipped a beat. She was stunning. Her hair fell in soft waves, and the delicate dress highlighted her beauty in an ethereal way. But what captivated him the most was the sparkle in her eyes. Pure happiness, untainted by the struggles of the past. As she walked toward him, James held his breath. When she reached the altar, he took her hands in his and whispered, "You look beautiful." Tears welled in her eyes as she responded, "Thank you." The officiant began the ceremony, speaking about love, partnership, and the meaning of building a life together. When it was time for the vows, James took a deep breath before beginning. "Sophie, from the moment I first saw you, you challenged me. You never bowed down to me, never blindly accepted my decisions. And that's what made me fall in love with you." His voice softened as he continued. "You taught me to be a better man. You made me see that power and money mean nothing if I don't have someone by my side to share life with. I promise to love, respect, and make you happy every day of my life." Sophie could barely contain her emotion as she began her vows. "James, I spent my life fighting alone, thinking I could never trust anyone. But you were persistent. You never gave up on me. And today, I know I never want to live without you." They exchanged rings, symbolizing their eternal bond, and when the officiant declared them husband and wife, James pulled her into a passionate kiss as the guests applauded. It was official. They were husband and wife. The honeymoon was perfect. Sophie and James traveled to beautiful destinations, enjoying every second together. From the romantic streets of Paris to the serene beaches of Bali, they embraced the adventure of exploring new cultures and creating memories that would last a lifetime. When they returned, their life as a married couple started even better than they had imagined. James insisted on spoiling her, bringing coffee to bed every morning, while Sophie returned the favor by preparing romantic dinners. Their love only grew stronger, deepened by the challenges they had overcome together. But something began to change in Sophie. She felt strange, constantly tired, nauseous, and more emotional than usual. One morning, while in the bathroom, her heart raced as she looked at the pregnancy test in her hands. 2 lines. She was pregnant. Emotion overwhelmed her, and tears streamed down her face. She and James were going to have a baby. But when she went to the doctor for confirmation, the surprise was even bigger. She was expecting twins. When she got home, James found her sitting on the couch, holding the ultrasound picture in her hands. "What is it?" he asked, concerned in his voice. She looked at him, her eyes shining. "We're having twins." James's eyes widened before a huge smile spread across his face. "Oh my God." He pulled her into a strong hug. "We're having 2 babies." He held her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. "You just gave me the best news of my life. I love you so much, James. And I love you more." The following months were an emotional roller coaster. James became even more protective, constantly spoiling Sophie and making sure she was comfortable. He talked to the babies before bedtime, gave her foot massages, and insisted she didn't overdo anything. Finally, at the baby shower surrounded by friends and family, they revealed they were expecting a boy and a girl. James held Sophie close and whispered, "We built an empire together. Now we'll build a family." She smiled, her heart overflowing with happiness. "And it'll be the best one ever." At that moment, Sophie knew she had everything she had ever dreamed of: a home, true love, and now a growing family. And she would never be alone again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were James?